Welcome to the Biz Essentials Podcast. I'm your host, Veronica, and today we're going to be talking to S.D Howard, who also goes by the pen name S.D Howard. And he is an author, as well as an author coach and an editor. And he's going to be talking to us about how to build a bingeable book. That's right, I said build, not write. He's going to talk to us about the process of writing a book that people simply can't put down. So if you've always wanted to write a book, stick around and let's talk to S.D Howard.
Tony Robbins once said, "No matter how many mistakes you make or how slow you progress, you are still way ahead of everyone who isn't trying." This is the Biz Essentials. You want to grow, get ahead, keep the spark. Here you'll get valuable insights and empowerment to grow personally and professionally. Isn't it about time you turn your dreams into successful passion projects? Learn how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself. The B Essentials. This is the Biz Essentials. And this is your host, Veronica of Veronica Ventures.
But why don't we start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Steven, but I've been going under the pen name S.D Howard since it just sounded cooler on the book cover than than my full name. I have been writing since I was 16. The ironic part is that I used to hate it. Like, I absolutely loathed writing. It wasn't until I had a particular project that I had to do, write a poem, describe an item without actually saying what it was, and I then fell in love with it. I'm a fantasy nerd, so I was like, swords, obviously, because necessary. So I wrote about a sword, going in and out of the fire, being forged, the whole process from the sword's perspective. And it's my favorite poem that is since lost to the sands of time and multiple moves. So I will forever cherish it in my memory. No one else gets to enjoy it.
One of these days when you're super famous, you can find it and then auction it off or something for charity.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's going to find it somewhere and be like, man, this is an awesome poem. And I'm going to be like, it was. I started writing, couldn't get enough of it after that. And being a huge Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia fan, I wanted to write something along those lines. And so I started writing a fan fiction. Shortly into it, I realized I didn't want to get sued for, basically using someone else's ideas. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start my own trilogy. I started with a book, but unfortunately, I have what's called write-a-series-itis. It's terminal. It means that no matter what book I touch, it's probably going to turn into some series of some sort. So, the main series that I have planned right now is now up to 12 books.
Oh, wow.
And The City of Snow and Stars is the first of the 12, technically speaking. So I have a lot of writing to do. But yeah, grew up in a Christian home and went through just a lot of hard stuff through my younger and teenage years in particular. A lot of depression. Got to the point of very close to committing suicide. It was in that moment when I was 18 that I just felt like God said that I have more for you than this. Still a lot of pain and a lot of struggle that came after that. It's been quite the journey. I got married in 2011, worked so many different jobs, got into developmental editing and did that for a couple of years, and then published my book in the end of 2020. Got hired on as an author coach with the publisher who actually published my book, and I've been doing that since December of last year. So it's been a wild ride.
That sounds it. That's really cool that you found writing at such an early age. I did too, actually. I have a big fat book of poetry, and I actually I have it, so it's kind of cool. And some of it's like totally cringy. I'm like, oh my god, that's so terrible. But some of it's decent, at least for my point of view. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the book is actually about?
The first book follows Trinia, who has the ability to duplicate herself perfectly in mind and body. It was something that I had not seen done in fantasy before. I like challenging myself in writing, and So like in this case, right in the opening chapter 1, you see Trinia on the run. She's trying to escape, and she creates a duplicate as a scapegoat so that way she can get away alive. And you immediately get this sense of, oh my gosh, that is kind of sick that she literally sacrifices a part of herself to do this. But you also see the emotional torment and agony that she's in. The consequences of that was something that I really wanted to play around with and explore. And I like magic with a consequence system. I don't
Right.
like it when they're just like unlimited power and then they don't actually use that in any meaningful way. Like there's no consequence. Like how do you combat that? There has to be a
Right.
balance somewhere. And so she goes on the run. Her whole goal is to stop her father from basically unleashing a genocide using her powers. And she's being abused. So she's fleeing for her life. And she's going to the enemy of her people, the other 4 kingdoms, to try and raise the alarm that, like, hey, dad is going to try and kill everyone and rebuild the old Ergid Empire that had ruled for thousands of years and was overthrown a millennia before. And so along the way, she meets a failed mage who's also a crown prince on the run from life and responsibility. She meets a man of legend who's been like hiding in the shadows. A talking wolf who is everybody's favorite character at this point. Mandar, that's the wolf. He's just the broest of bros. Then there's Batani, who's the sassy shifter. It's a fantastic journey through everyone's lives. I write character-driven stories, so the plot is particularly heavy on running for most of book 1. But the characters and the depths that we get to journey with them as they're traveling and trying to escape. You've got a crazed, blood-sucking banshee hunting them down. Like there's all sorts of craziness. There's critters. I love fantasy. So if there's fantasy involved, there needs to be fantasy creatures. So I got like 6-foot centipedes, giant mountain trolls, 3-headed lizard beasts, like you name it, like there's going to be some crazy creatures in here. That's really kind of the basic premise of the book is following Trinia's journey as she runs from abuse. She kind of starts coming into her own. She kind of gets hit and the wind kind of taken out of her. And it's all setting up for book 2, The City of Stone and Sorrow, which I'm currently in the middle of writing.
I think I'm definitely going to get that book for my kids.
The book tackles some really hard topics that I wasn't seeing done in Christian fiction in general, but it's tackling topics around abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, mental, actually all of the above this book's case, the human trafficking, and the question of why does God let bad things happen. And so a lot of emotionally intense scenes. So most of the time I recommend to the parents to like read through it and then determine for yourself what the kids read, because some kids nowadays they'll read Game of Thrones and I know my book is not anywhere remotely close to that graphic. So
Right. Yeah. Wow. Kids reading Game of Thrones. I could barely stand that book. Like on a personal
yeah.
level, because I too have trauma. So I'm like, oh, we're out too much. I watched
Yeah.
1 season. When Ned Stark died.
If Sean Bean's in a movie, it's just natural that he's going to be the first one to be killed.
That's true. But at the same time, like the whole first season, you're like rooting for him. You don't usually see the protagonist killed like in the middle of a story, so to speak. I mean, I realize that it's the end of that book, and yes, it laid out the foundation for a really good storyline, which I hope he finishes soon. But
Yeah.
I was just like, my husband jokes with me that I need my like Disney plot line where it's like, okay, build up, and then resolution, and the good guys win.
Right.
Like, really quick to touch back on what you had said, what exactly is developmental editing?
Yeah, so developmental editing is the very first step someone should take when doing an edit on their book. It is the structural edit. So you're not really looking for grammar, you're not looking for punctuation. You'll come across those things and you can definitely mark them down for later, but it's really focusing on the big picture. Does the story make sense? Are the character arcs flowing? How's the pace, how's the flow from chapter to chapter, even from sentence to sentence? Your average developmental edit is going to take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. It is the most expensive form of editing, hands down. And for those who want to do this themselves, the thing that you want to do as an author is to try and take a step back for at least a month to a month and a half, because you have to switch from right brain creative to more left brain analytical, and you have to come at it from a fresh perspective, and you can't do that as effectively if you wrote the end, okay, flipping back to chapter 1 and being like, oh yeah, I wrote that, that's awesome, and then you just read your novel rather than actually looking at it with a critical eye.
That makes sense because this is true, and even in short writings where you think something and you think you wrote it, but you didn't necessarily write it, you just thought it, or vice
Yeah.
versa, you wrote it something that you're like, wait, I wrote that.
Yeah.
So I can
Yeah.
imagine writing a big old book that you don't want to accidentally remember that you wrote something as opposed to actually reading it.
And that's a really hard switch to make for a lot of authors because they're so focused on like, oh, I have to do like 6 drafts before it's perfect. I submitted my second draft to the publisher and it was a hot mess of a dumpster fire. Like it was all over the place. And I mean, it required a 99% rewrite in 9 weeks, which as an 80,000 word novel was labor intensive to say the least.
I can imagine. Wow. So if I'm not delving into it too much, what is your writing process?
My writing process, it was really, really interesting because I didn't really know what it was up until about 2017 when I started to really develop it. I
Mm.
had plotted my original trilogy into the ground, and I was just like, I hate writing. Writing sucks. So I went back to writing fan fiction, and I just posted it up on Wattpad, filled with all of the angsty feels. And most of my readers are about done with therapy, which is great. They've recovered well. Um, the process of like, okay, how do I build a book? Because like I had written, 10,000 words, and I was like, oh man, that's a lot. Then I wrote 30,000 words. I was like, oh wow, that's even more. I was like, but man, 80,000 words, like that's a lot. I don't know how I'm going to write that much. It started with how many words an hour can I write? So I scheduled a set time and I sat down and I wrote a blog post. On average, I hit 700 to 900 on a good day. And then for an average day, somewhere between 4 to 500 words an hour. For my first draft, I choose a spectrum and it's anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 words per chapter, which means I can then equate out exactly how many hours it's going to take me roughly to hit my minimum chapter count. Then from there, it's like, okay, what do I want the book to look like? So I've been telling people as of recently, I don't write books, I build them because I wanted to write books that were bingeable, but they still gave you everything that you loved about that genre. So I write Christian fantasy. And this was developed in the fire of the 9 weeks when I was having to rewrite everything in my book. So super handy to rebuild your writing process from the ground up while it's building an entire world. It's super fun. But I was like, okay, I want 80,000 words and I want to have 40 chapters. So I'm not just going to be like, just see what happens. No, I want 40 chapters, which meant I had an average of 2,000 words per chapter that I needed to hit. And the thing with that number was anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 words equates out to about a 7 to 10 minute read time for your average reader. On average, I want someone to be able to finish my chapter in 10 minutes. And so I went into it with that mindset. The book ended up at 40 chapters, 88,000 words. And I've had at least 6 people tell me that they've binged it in a day. And one person who currently holds the record of binging it in 97 minutes.
Wow.
So I did it effectively.
What exactly is a bingeable written book, so to speak?
A bingeable book, in my opinion, is just the one that you can't put down and that you pass out from exhaustion before you dare put a bookmark in it. Or heaven forbid, you're one of those people like me who dog ear the pages, and then you're heretics amongst the reading community.
Say evil,
Um,
evil. No, just kidding.
I know. It's like blasphemy.
Exactly.
Essentially, the way that I build a bingeable book is I want to make sure that every chapter builds off of the previous one, and that previous chapter leaves off with a mini cliffhanger. And so all of the mini cliffhanger is really just raising a question or a thought or an idea in the reader's mind that you then immediately answer in the next chapter. It could be in the opening sentence, or it could just be in that chapter itself. You can maybe push it out another chapter or so. Essentially, it's playing off how the brain works. I like to joke that I'm my reader's drug dealer because the brain loves completing tasks. It
Hmm.
loves accomplishing something. So if someone has a 10-minute read time, it means that they can get it done quickly. They then feel like they've accomplished something, which releases the happy little dopamine hit in the brain. And they're like, I mean, I could probably do one more. Like, one more is not
I
going
have
to hurt.
time.
And then, like, 3 a.m., they're just like, okay, I finished the whole book. Now that I'm emotionally wrecked, I'm going to try and go to sleep. It's that one thing that they have to turn the page because they have to know what happens. And this can be done in nonfiction as well. It's just a matter of how you set up the next chapter. And if you know what the next chapter is going to bring, which requires just a little bit of forethought, then you end the previous one with that little bit of a question that piques the reader's interest, and they're like, ah, "Dang it, I got to
I
keep
gotta find out
reading.
what happens.
I got to find out what happens." But
I've
yeah,
been
it's
there, so that's
basically
how you
just
guys
like,
do it.
yep, basically the point of a book is to communicate a story, an idea. It's really just playing off of reader expectations and giving the reader an experience that they're going to remember. I've had people tell me that this is the fastest I've ever read a book, ever, and they don't like fantasy. And I was like, one, I appreciate that you even read the book. Two, I appreciate that you enjoyed the book that much. I had somebody who was like, I've not read a book this good in 10 years. It's those types of things that I gave them an experience in exchange for the money that they gave. And I think if authors think about it in that sense a little bit more, then they're not doing it so much for themselves as they are themselves and the readers.
That makes a lot of sense. Like what I do, creating video, you got to think about your audience, giving them value, whether it
Exactly.
be content as an information or just the experience, like you said. I want to touch back on how you actually go through the process of writing a book because I heard you mention how you structure like the word count and building the book, but I've had many story ideas. I get started and then I get caught in the nitty gritty and I never really
Yes.
get into the story that like maybe like one or two chapters and then I'm like, I don't even know what's gonna happen. Like I'm done. This is too hard.
Yeah,
And but like at least one of my ideas that I had recently, which I'll have to share with you after we record, if you don't mind. It's like one page.
totally. Absolutely.
Um, but how do you go from like, okay, this is the concept that I have to actually structuring it out? Because you said you have 12 books. The series is gonna be 12 books. So you must already have the storyline mapped out over those 12 books, at least on a general basis. How do you do that?
Yeah. So I'll use one of my most recent story ideas because I basically outlined the book in less than 24 hours from start to finish. And again, it was roughly about 40 chapters because I like big books. So
And you cannot lie.
I cannot lie about it. I actually just totally stole the idea from my daughter, and it involves mermaids. And I was like, ah, that's dumb. And then she started she continued telling us the story. I'm like, I am totally stealing that and turning it into a book. Thank you very much. um, but the way that I have come to outline books is I used to plot. Like I was a very heavy plotter. And that's what really kind of killed my entire original trilogy. It's still that trilogy is still a part of this overall 12 now, because one character threads through the entire series. But it was that depth that kept tripping me up. So then I went to just pantsing, just full on pantsing, and just being like, I'll just see what happens. That's how I wrote the first draft of The City of Snow and Stars. Just pantsed it. Then I realized that was utter chaos and that doesn't work
Been there.
consistently. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I need a better way. So I developed what I call the milestone method. So basically, I figure out where I want the book to start, roughly where I would like to see the book end, and then where my turning point is in the middle. And then what I will do is I will write, like if you think of it as a horizontal line with big marks on the end, kind of a medium-sized mark in the middle, and then little alternating tick marks along that timeline. Each chapter has a theme, a big theme that I want to address. So, like if I were to pull up that, then it's like chapter 3 such and such thing happens, but I don't know how we get there. I just know that that's the thing that I want to happen.
Mhm.
And this is fluid. So I use a software called Campfire Pro. Absolutely love that. I got the world building pack, and it saved my life during the entire revisions process for book one, because you can make a new event and then you can move it wherever you need to. So I was rearranging chapters, I was moving chapters out of the way. I would color them green once I had finished them. And then if I wasn't sure if I was going to keep them or not, I'd color them orange and just move them off to the side. That was basically how I've done it. And because I'm doing bigger books hitting around the 80,000 word mark for consistency, planning for 40 chapters, then I was like, 3 acts isn't going to work. It doesn't allow me to pace things correctly. So I broke it up into 4 acts, each with 10 chapters. And my transition chapter to move into the next act is chapter 10, 20, and 30. And
Mhm.
so I know that I'm building up to either like in book 2, chapter 10 is the mind-blowing plot twist that I was planning, and my poor readers, they just looked at me and they were like, "What the hell, Stephen? Why would you do this to us?" And I'm just like, "Thank you for confirming that I did the right thing in that with that." I love doing that to the readers. So that's basically how I started developing my outlining. Is I would just build out my 4 acts with the general ideas that I wanted to have in each chapter, and then I would start writing from there. And then if I
Mhm.
needed to, so like chapter 11 in book 2, it changed a lot of the things that I was planning, and so I had to rearrange the next 4 chapters in order for the flow to make sense, because I have 6 people cast as POV characters in book 2. I tried
Mhm.
killing some off in book 1, but unfortunately they were resilient little buggers, and so they made it into book 2, and some just demanded that they have a POV.
Yeah.
So that's essentially how I've been doing it. And when I'm talking with people about it, I was like, this is what allows me to build a book, not plan a book, but to build it, because I'm doing it with purpose. I'm doing it with intentionality. I'm not throwing out entire chapters. It is simply repurposing them or rearranging them, because it's a living, breathing document until I write the end and the book is published.
Another thing that you mentioned is that you're an author coach. What is
Yes.
an author coach?
So an author coach is basically somebody who's kind of been through the process. It's just, do you know how to tell a story? Do you know how to help somebody communicate their story effectively? Before I had a book published, that's what I was helping people do. I knew how to take somebody from start to finish of writing a book, because I had at the time, 13 years of writing experience that I could bring to bear for them. And
Mhm.
it's walking them through the steps of, okay, do you have a writing process? No. Okay, let's build you a writing process. Let's figure out what is going to be the most effective for you, how you operate. Because most of the time, authors just kind of operate as they always have. And so to have somebody from the outside step in and be like, okay, here's what I'm seeing. And then the author can take that and go, oh, okay, so I need to make, this adjustment and that adjustment. Author coach is like part editor, part writer, part therapist, to pull people back from the emotional precipice of which they want to fling themselves off of.
I can say I've been there, especially with writing. Couple quick questions. So let's say you have your whole draft of your story arc. How much of your characters do you know when you start, or how much do you recommend that you actually know?
So when I started the City of Snow and Stars, I had no characters whatsoever. The first line that started with was, Trinia ran through the streets as fast as her legs could take her. And that was the opening line. I had no idea who the heck Trinia was. I had no idea why she was running. I just knew that it probably was bad. I was like,
Yeah.
because if she's anything like me, like, she's not going to be running unless she's chased by a polar bear or something. Like, I'm not running for nothing. And actually, I had worksheets that I created that kind of take people through the process of starting with brainstorming. So typically, the first idea that you have is not going to be the one that you go with. It's just the seed. It's that very first inkling of like, oh man, this is super interesting. I wonder where this will go. And
Mm-hmm.
so I actually work out a funnel system where you can kind of weed through and brainstorm through the different ideas until you find the one that you are actually passionate about writing. Because you may like a story idea, but unless you love it, you're not going to finish it. It's just how it is. And then the next one is building characters. And so this is something that was difficult for me to actually put onto paper because I do this naturally now, where I ruminate on what do I want the characters to feel? What do I want them to experience? That all happens before I come up with what they look like, because what they look like, it depends on what their past is. So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
if they just had a really hard upbringing, then maybe their face is a little bit sterner, but I wouldn't have known that or chosen that had I not come up with the backstory first. Or maybe they were abused and their dad hit them upside the head with a bottle and it left a scar on their cheek. Well, I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't done that part first. So it's like, what do you want the characters to feel? What do you want them to experience? This is that part of intentionality and purpose that you put into the writing. I give everybody who does the calls the worksheets that I have and my writing template, which I mentioned earlier about scheduling your time and all that kind of stuff. Because everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has lives. It's a go at your own pace. Okay, let's have a set of calls, and then we'll go through the worksheets. And again, some authors need more help than others, so we would have more frequent calls. And then I go through how to plot. Um, how to outline effectively, how to get past writer's block, how to learn to quote unquote just write, which is like the least helpful thing another author can say to another author. And I just want to
That's right.
backhand everybody who says that, or they're like, well, just write trash. I'm like, no one feels good about writing trash. Just understand that it's not going to be as good as you want it to be. It's the first draft. All of that they get with the calls. And then I just walk them through the process as often as they want to. And so
Mm,
it's just depending on the author. And I give them the homework. And so you develop it over time.
mm,
And the more consistent you are, you'll look back and go, wow, my writing now is so much better than that. Yeah, because you've been working on it. That's
right.
what happens.
That actually makes a lot of sense because, like you said, people get busy with their lives, but they still have like that passion. So that's really awesome. I'm gonna have to schedule a
Exactly.
call.
One of my very first clients, she had been writing for 2 years. She had about 114,000 words of content, but it wasn't a cohesive story. Over the next 3.5 months, she got her writing process nailed down. We figured out what her book was about. We structured the content, whittled it down to 100,000 words, and then was like, okay, now that you've done this, you've got it structured, we have it broken up into parts, we have the chapters, we have everything we want to do. Now you need to go through and you need to edit. Over the course of a total of 8 months, she did her first draft, second draft, and submitted to the publisher and actually published at the same time as I did.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
it's really, really fun for me as an author coach because now working with the publisher, we have cohorts come through. So it's a hybrid publisher, New Degree Press. It's crowdsourcing to raise funds to cover all of the costs for publishing. So that way they retain the authors 100% of the distribution rights and all of the royalties. Not so much fun for the authors because they have to do the campaign, and the campaign sucks, admittedly. Like I'm doing my second campaign and it's horrible. I hate doing it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're raising money for the second version of it?
My publisher was asking me like, hey, what would you prefer as a creative author, an audiobook or an illustrated edition? I was like, well, I'm already getting an audiobook done because I have the distribution right, so I can do whatever I want with it. And so I'm partnering with somebody. She's finished recording the book. Probably going to be coming out in either late August or early September, if everything goes well. All hail our Amazon overlords, and as long as they are appeased, then maybe. So right now we're campaigning for the illustrated edition, and the illustrations that are just the concepts that have come back are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, just seeing Trinia's mid duplication power in picture form was just amazing to me.
Wow.
And so there's different perk levels. You can get just the book for 75, and people have told me like that's a lot for a book. Like not even Game of Thrones Illustrated Edition is that big. It's true. The reason for that is that it's covering all of the additional costs. Illustrated editions are not cheap to print, and it's
Mm,
including all the shipping. But the fun ones, the bundle perks as I call them, I name all of them. Lore Keeper is the book plus you're basically pre-ordering the audiobook.
mm,
Number 2, Lore Master, you are getting the book plus 2 1-hour coaching calls with me about your book, or a book talk with you and your friends, whichever works. And then number 3, Story Weaver, is you get a once a month group call with me as I write through book 2, and a side character written into book 2 that can either help or hinder my main characters. So you basically get to partner with me in that, which is going to be a lot of fun.
that sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm all,
that's the one I'm the most excited about.
yeah, I'm a total nerd and into fantasy too, so I'm like, ooh, this sounds amazing. For our listeners who are listening, I'm going to put the website in the description, but he actually has a link to the Campfire Pro that he was talking about on his website, as well as the fundraising pages. So you guys can check that out. And of course, I'll put that in the show notes. And when I edit this video, I'll put it right here. That may be all my questions, although I am going to be scheduling a call because I'm super intrigued. I'm going to be one of those people where I'm like, okay, let's do a call and then let's wait forever because I have no time. And then we'll do another call. Or because, I'd like to take on a lot of different projects.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, right? I don't have what did you call it?
Write a series-itis.
Yeah. I have a million ideas because I start with one and then I'm like, oh wait, no, this idea is better. And then but I do have like a really cool idea for a book that I think I want to run by you. So we'll schedule a call. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today so that for our listeners, any last thoughts that you wanted to share?
I think one of the big things is, if you are planning to become an author, you need to decide what kind of author you want to be. The first kind is a one and done. Like I got it out of my system. I can say I'm a published author. The book's out there. I can do a little bit of promotion for it and tell everybody, but that's not what I want to do full time. I wanted to have a published book. And it's easier now than ever before to be able to do something like that. If, however, you want to be a full-time author, then there's a complete mindset shift that you have to have. You have to understand that you're in this for the long haul and the pain and the suffering that comes with it, because there is. You are essentially starting your own small business. You have a product. You have to sell that product to other people.
How do you recommend that they actually start marketing themselves as an author, and what kind of mistakes do you see people make most often?
Oh man, they wait till the book is done to start telling people that they're an author.
Oh yeah.
That's usually the biggest problem. I actually have an Instagram carousel talking about this. I was like, if you ever want to get past having aspiring in your Instagram title, then basically put your butt down in the chair and start working. You have to be thinking like a business owner. If you wait till you have the product, then it's already too late because you're not building up an audience beforehand. Whereas you can
Mm.
start engaging with people now. Take them through the process. Tell everyone you're writing a book. You're inviting people along your author journey. So from start to finish, you could be like, hey, I'm losing my mind right now because all of my characters are talking in my head and only authors are going to understand that. Everybody else is like, that's called schizophrenia. And we're like, no, that's called creativity. Get out of here. But yeah, they wait too long. They don't get an author website set up. They try and, quote unquote, hack the social media algorithm, which is, guess what? Gamed to beat you. You have to get people off of social media. You need to get them into a newsletter. People should have a blog. I know SEO is super intimidating for a lot of people, but really it's not as intimidating as it sounds. It's just a matter of knowing who's your audience, what are they searching for, how can you generate eyes on your content. Part of that is by building an audience now, getting people excited. offering, sneak peeks. That could be your reader magnet to your newsletter. It's, hey, once a month or every other week, I'm going to send you a snippet of the book that I'm writing, and you get to follow along with me on my journey. Or maybe it's videos that you upload to YouTube, but it's only for your list. There's lots of different things that people can do with that. And it's going to be different for everybody. It's going to take you anywhere from 3 to 6 months to build an active and engaged audience if you're doing it right. Don't listen to all of the gurus who are like, well, you have to spend, X amount of dollars, or you need to do this or that. Like, very rarely are those actually effective. And that's knowing who your audience is. And you have to understand how people buy, how people sell, how people engage with your content, what is interesting content, how do you do ads effectively? Not just like, and I'm not talking like Facebook ads, I'm talking about like very targeted reader ads like BookBub, things like that. You have to understand how to do that. You have to understand your fixed cost, your variable cost, your break-even points if you're going to order physical products and you're going to sell them. You have to understand that if you're traveling to conventions, that there's sales tax that you have to remit to those states if you sell in their state.
Wow.
There's all of these little things that you have to begin to learn. I didn't know any of that stuff when I first started. I was just like, I just want to write a book. Like, that's it. That's all I thought. I thought that was the whole process. Like, I published the book and then I'm done. I get to move on to book 2. No, you have to market your book. You have to promote your book. You have to submit to different contests, some of them which will require money. You'll want to get book reviewers, which means that you'll in some cases need to offer your book for free, whether it be ebook, paperback, or hardback. Sometimes reviewers will take audiobooks. You have to figure out, how many versions of my book do I want to do? If you're going to go straight self-publishing, because it's important to you to retain the distribution rights, you need to make sure that you're estimating somewhere probably around $3,000 to $3,500 to do it well. And I would say that would be on the low end, because you have to understand that traditional publishers, they will budget roughly $12,000 to $20,000 for a book in order to bring it to market. So for everyone who's just like, I can do it for free. Yeah, you can, but that doesn't mean that you're going to do it good or do it well. So those are the main things. You have to think like a business person. You're not a author who is a business person. You are a business person who is an author.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, to think about it from that point of view. So thank you for that. That actually puts a whole new perspective on it for me, and I'm sure for our listeners who out there who are like me, who have always wanted to write a book. But so I want to thank you so much for coming on here to talk to me. It was very enlightening, and I can't wait to schedule a call and get started. I don't know when I'll actually finish, but hey, everybody who's listening, I'm an author and I'm writing a book. See, I did it.
Exactly. Good job. You took the first hardest step, is letting people know.
So today we talked to Stephen. He gave us lots of tips and tricks on how to write a bingeable book and how to get started right away. I'm actually going to schedule a call with him right after this, and we'll see how this works for me. Who knows? Maybe soon you'll see a best-selling book authored by yours truly. It's on my living list. We could do it. What do you think? See you next week.
You've been listening to the Biz Essentials. Thanks for listening to the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information, learning how to be productive, be successful, be joyful, and more importantly, be yourself, and turning your dreams into successful passion projects. By listening to this show, you've already set into motion the most important part, starting. So it's important to catch the next episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. In the meantime, hook up with us on social media at Veronica Ventures and at the Biz Essentials. Till next time, this is the Biz Essentials.
Benjamin Franklin once said, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. I think that's a noble goal for all of us. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and we'll catch you next time on the Biz Essentials. Bye.